A dark fleet in black space, the case of the Hidden Space Program and Space Fleet. This is on Humans Are Free by Vincent R. White, UFO Digest. A case made for a hidden space program and space fleet. 6 decades of suppressed science and technology have yielded a harvest of awesome proportion from retrieved ET craft, exchange programs, and human talent. A review of evidence of an enormous breakthrough in gravity, knowledge, and control. Here's a case is made that the public, NASA, is in a large part beyond its public missions, and Magical's prop, Watch the Bride distraction, while all the time a new radical paradigm of physics has been developed and kept in the black, but which will one day lead to the use of current physics text for landfill. This according to Vincent R. White. To paraphrase Winston Churchill, people stumble over great truths every day, but they pick themselves up and hurry on as if nothing had ever happened. This, it will be argued, is precisely what has happened to the case for operational field propulsion, another name for gravity control. What has been stumbled over is an immense and still expanding rich variety of sources of one of the biggest secrets around, and worse still, after stumbling over the evidence for a great breakthrough, most deny anything important took place, especially if it is not officially acknowledged reality. And the mental roadblocks are many. Some say we would know about this in a week, or it would be leaked all over. That this technology would be used and be employed against terrorists, and the airline industry would be flying these Jetson-like sleek G-ships instead of kerosene burners that every day darken the brown fog now growing around the planet's skies. These heterodox constellations of a variety of sources that we will present to paint a very different picture that indicates that such simplistic thinking does not describe our reality. While surveying a spectrum of sources, we will ask what Donnie Rumsfeld, the new Secretary of Defense, was trying to say a day before the 9/11, when he, in rather jocular fashion, mentioned almost in passing that the DoD seemed to have misplaced several $1 trillion. So what was he trying to say? How much would a black budget R&D gravity program cost? How much if it required a new paradigm of physics? How much if the price tag included a secret space fleet and a remote hidden spaceport, and an immense bodyguard of lies to keep this from the world and from the scrutiny of the taxpayers who paid for this? Who says it has not leaked all over? Well, one of the people that supposedly got the authority to disclose some of this is William Tompkins, and his videos are all over the YouTube. And he was one of the engineers that was designing aircraft carriers around the Second World War, and also spaceships. And he says it's the U.S. Navy that's doing all these fantastic trips to various other planets using his spaceships. And he goes into some details that, if you want, you can see. William Tompkins. Now, going back to this, who says it has not leaked all over? And what meaning is there to such leaks when minds are so made up that leaks are trashed faster than the leaks take place? And how do you know what vehicles special operations use in Afghanistan and elsewhere? Can you say we are not using such vehicles in carefully camouflaged manner? And for this, truth search does take in an atmosphere that is thick with the half-truths and lies of professional disinformation peddlers. These may source these many sources of origin, by the very many forms in which they appear, are mutually verifying. And when a deep insider reveals a gravity program, an independent engineer reports working on the same craft, and another pilot reports seeing a craft that resembles, down to small detail, while flying near a premier aerospace center, then the spreadsheet of truth that one builds to study this becomes formidable indeed. This methodology, however, requires a fine eclecticism, a wearing of many hats, for these nuggets of newsness will not be found by digging deeper in the same post hole endlessly. We must prowl in new directions. We have an embarrassment of evidence, as in the case of the UFO itself. It is from insiders who have told of working on actual field propulsion engines to a reporter with a major daily who in a deep background interview speaks of vast sums of money spent to achieve breakthroughs in gravity propulsion, with nary a word on the pages of the paper that is individual work as a senior editor. It ranges from a radio station editor in Withville, Virginia, who witnessed with others in the area a B-2 that was nearly hovering, which is impossible, unless it has another propulsion mode, to two UK hackers, one of which discovered anti-gravity engine documents files at WPAFB, and the other who is, I guess he's referring to Gary McKinnon, and the other who it seems stumbled on what seems to be a database on a secret space fleet, and again, Gary McKinnon. It's also so large a pile of evidence that indeed those who ignore this were required literally to walk around the evidence piled so high. For there is an overwhelming case that a scientific holy grail, an absolute absurdity to skeptics, a realizable dream to the optimists, was a black world milestone that was achieved decades ago. This is nearly an open secret for those who are willing to walk through the data in all its manifold, intersecting, interlocking, and mutually reinforcing facts. Taking so-called skeptics to the woodshed, examples bound. There's an embedded video here, night vision infrared, and you can see UFOs in there. Now, a physics hunting near Fort Hood at dusk was astonished. A physicist hunting near Fort Hood at dusk was astonished and very impressed by the sights of a large black triangle passing quietly over his head at low altitude. In awestruck curiosity, aiming his telescope lens on his rifle at the belly of the silent beast as it passed over his head, he stared and suddenly stared, startled, as he noticed small, stenciled English writing on the bottom of the vehicle. English writing at the bottom of the vehicle. I hope he made out what they said. This. I'm sorry. Okay. The small letters were spelled out rescue. RESCUE. The small letters at the bottom of the vehicle spelled out rescue, and an arrow which pointed to a small square saying, sorry, emergency release. Oh my goodness. Okay. So obviously this was not, it's not for space aliens. It was from an English-speaking manufacturer. And since he was hunting in the U.S., it was probably a U.S., advanced spacecraft. Release and rescue and emergency release. So the small letter was spelling rescue and an arrow, which pointed to the small square saying emergency release with a recessed lever. That's nice. It seems doubtful that alien visitors would employ this unless they are crafty and accommodating beyond any understanding. Oh my goodness. All right. It reminds me of the other craft that had the German writing, the Cyrillic, the Russian writing on it. All right. Now, those wearing, quote, if it wasn't announced officially, it isn't true glasses, simply ignore events such as this. They fail to escape an indivisible line of present limits on what is possible. All right. The conclusion is obvious. If something is seen flying, and it flies silently, without helium to lift it or aerodynamics to lift and it does not employ jets or propellers, then how does it fly? And what happens when it has the English writing on? Now, by clean living and righteous thoughts, or is it gravity control? It's gravity control. Oh my goodness. And a fundamental question shouts out, is it ours or is it theirs? Night vision triangle UFO video. The skeptics who persist in ignoring this deserve an empirical spanking. A spanking for there is no excuse for not reaching a conclusion about this. It was one of ours. Most NASA shuttle program employees are unaware of this epical advance. It's like unlikely that the President of the United States or that the Prime Minister of the UK knows. Unlikely, for it will be argued, this gravity secret is guarded with the same extreme need to no basis as the UFO reality itself. Yet, paradoxically, this secret has been an open secret to the open-minded empiricist. There are those who are willing to really look at what sober observers by the dozens and dozens have unambiguously witnessed. This operational gravity control secret is buried deep in the black U.S. Air Force world, those projects named Unacknowledged Special Access Programs. These black programs are purportedly deemed so vital a secret that their mere existence is lied about even to key U.S. congressional committees whose job it is to oversee these black budgets. This world-changing technology, controlled by the same quasi-public, quasi-private international transnational entity that Dr. Stephen Greer of the much-maligned Disclosure Project describes. The global stakes are immense for field propulsion is the key to a radically different and smaller planet. It's also virtually economic earthquake for the entire world's fleets of kerosene-burning jets are as obsolete as horse-drawn carriages and passage near complete reorganization of the hub and spoke traffic pattern when a G-liner can task off and land anywhere. Some very anguished discussions must take place in a room where the classified programs that say Boeing's Phantom Works bump up against the very public commercial aircraft production efforts when the white world engineers say, the white meaning the white projects, what do you mean we have to junk our entire investment and manufacturing plant? This author's effort is not to prove field propulsion exists. This is impossible in a few thousand words, and it also reflects a misunderstanding what is possible in the present reality when the draconian, ruthless society, secrecy, hijacks the hard evidence, and we are forced into a journalistic modality. Now the proof will come, perhaps the day after a stunned world watches our secret space vehicles is in massed shining spectacle in the flyover display of the National Capital, Washington, D.C. It is to appeal to the empiricist spirit of, let's go actually take a look. A salute to those ordinary folk living in California and Nevada who set out on curious caravans and saw the wildly unexpected. They didn't stumble past and hurry on. Wouldn't arguably one of the greatest scientific and technological breakthroughs of the last 100 years be immediately recognized? It was by scores and scores of individuals in joining primarily 3 private groups. They spent many nights staking out the best viewing locations to watch the unpredictable, occasional, spectacular shows emerging from premier aerospot test facilities. Professional aerospace journalists were largely missing, in person or in print, with a possible stealthy exception or two. Where these enthusiasts who gathered in the night with cameras and notepads, wild-eyed fanatics imagining or misperceiving every light in the sky? Or were they alert citizens such as Gary Schultz, a chemical physicist, who recognized history when he saw it flying through the night sky without propellers or jets? They were ordinary people watching ordinary things, practicing empiricists with a let's go take a look attitude over it could be happening prejudice, or meaning it could not be happening prejudice. They happened, for the most part, to live near aerospace test facilities. They were very unlike SETI partisans who used the abstract concatenated assumptions of the fake Drake equation, which in predicting intelligent life probabilities must effectively wear horse blinders to ignore the fallacy, as do those who look for alien light years away instead of empirically checking in their own backyards. Our UFOs fly not according to conservative prejudices, but as hidden intense black projects, real imperatives, and test schedules. It isn't landing lights on Janet Airways' Boeing 737, the shuttle aircrafts that fly in and out of Area 51 being described. It was not a red flag military exercise flare drop being witnessed by thousands in Phoenix in 1996. What all these dedicated and widespread groups saw, in spite of hours-long observations and close approaches, has been sinfully ignored by the mass media for 6 decades. A flock of white crows. There's a philosophical principle that to prove white crows exist at all, all you need to do is find one. Figuratively speaking, the observers previously referred to at Giant Rock and other locales around our country sighted an entire flock of white crows flying from at least 2 nests or test sites. These particular UFOs emerged from an official Northrop RCS radar cross-section electromagnetic test facility, also known as the Tejon Ranch, in the Tehachapi Mountains, northwest of Lancaster, California. Much of this astonishing activity here in the Antelope Valley took place from the late 80s through the early 90s. It's much quieter there today, but highly anomalous sightings still continue. Seen in the Tehachapis were silent, glowing, pulsating, saucer-shaped objects that looked like UFOs, flew like UFOs, and were lit like UFOs. In addition, flying triangles, boomerangs, and orbs were occasionally seen. They were silent, except for a slim hum, sometimes a slight hum, sometimes heard at close proximity, flying testimony to a strangely not so hidden technological and scientific breakthrough a mere hour-and-a-half drive from Los Angeles. In the next 4 paragraphs are the very condensed and abbreviated highlights of what just a few witnesses have described at the Tejon Ranch in Area 51. They are emblematic of the public database, accessible to all, but ignored by most respectable aerospace journalists. Take the observations of one large group founded by a chemical physicist, Gary Schultz. They gathered at a spot not too distant from the Tejon Northrop facility in 1991. The large group of 30 individuals watched with binoculars and telescopes from an elevated vantage point in the early morning hours, as in Gary's words said, a white, glowing, pulsating, disc-shaped object about 30 feet in diameter slowly rose up from behind a small hill on the site. We watched in astonishment as it rose only a few hundred feet into the air, then slowly made its way east towards Edward Air Force Base. Over the next couple of hours, the group watched as over 24 similar silent craft made their way east. One of the saucers, quote-unquote, approached the group's position before backing away. It's worth repeating again, a clear flying saucer shape was observed. Comparing the previous group account with 2 other separate individual reports, we have reports of similar craft. Both football-shaped objects or airliner-like discs were described in the summer of 1991, and on April 15, 1992, both individuals reported dark, unlit objects sitting on the surface which suddenly became brightly lit. The objects then ascended only a few hundred feet into the air. Only a small complex of buildings could be seen where the objects emerged. They both reported up to 3 or 4 objects in the air at once, fleet testing, perhaps. The objects were all silent and were either glowing white or orange gold. The aerial activity took place over a period of less than 2 hours. In another comparative analysis of a detailed Area 51 report by KV, March 11, 1993, we find the same unlit airliner-like craft, which was sighted on a runway near Groom Lake. The experienced military aircraft observer witnessed a short roll takeoff arc of a strobing aircraft when, like turning up a lamp, and the entire airframe became brightly lit. The object then hovered, then performed rapid accessions and non-aerodynamic movements, moving more rapidly than any aircraft the observer had ever seen. The craft suddenly went dark and in a short arc landed. This is by Humans Are Free, and it's Creative Commons, and I'll leave a link below for you for this. Tell me what you think. I'm sorry about the cracking up laughing, but you know, they're so obliging that they wrote it in English. Okay. The rescue, with an arrow pointing to a small square saying emergency release with the recessed lever. I mean, what can you say? That looks like something under a jet airplane or a passenger jet. And something similar I read a couple of days ago on something that they found, a crash with Cyrillic writing. I think it was around the Second World War or something, when they were, I guess, experimenting with aircraft. That was on when the time of Wernher von Braun coming to NASA in the United States. Anyway, tell me what you think about this, the dark fleet and the black spaces in the secret space programs. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.